English. 7 months and no more, he shall obtain the prelacy, by his decease he shall cause a great schism, another shall be 7 months chief justice, near Venice peace and union shall grow again. Not. By this prophecy 3 things are foretold. The first is of a pope that shall sit but 7 months, at whose death there will be a great schism. The second is of a great governor or chief justice, such as were called by the ancient Romans praetors, shall be in authority also but 7 months. And the third, that hard by Venice all these differences shall be composed, and peace made again. English. Before the lake wherein Mostir was thrown, of 7 months, and his army overthrown, Spaniards shall be spoiled by Albaneses, by delaying, loss in giving the battle. Not. It is very difficult, if not impossible, to tell what our author meaneth by the lake, wherein the Mostir was thrown, and lost his army. The Albaneses are a nation between the Venetians and Greece, now for the most part subject to the said Venetians. English. The deceiver shall be put into the dungeon, and bound fast for a while. The clerk united, the head with his crosier staff, pricking upright, shall draw in the contented. Not. The 2 first verses are plain, the 2 last verses not so, which seemeth to foretell of a great union among the clergy, which shall draw to them those that were peaceably affected. English. The synagogue barren, without fruit, shall be received among the infidels. In Babylon, the daughter of the persecuted, miserable and sad shall cut her wings. Not. A synagogue is a place where the Jews assemble for divine worship, as the Christians do in churches or temples. The said Jews' synagogue is threatened here to be unfruitful and barren, and chiefly in Babylon, by the means of a woman, daughter of one persecuted, belike of some of their own tribe, whom the rest did persecute. English. At the ends of the Var to change the Pompetans, near the shore shall 3 fair children be born, ruin to the people by competent age, to change that country's kingdom, and see it grow no more. Not. The first verse being made of insignificant words, as Var and Pompetans cannot be understood, the other 3 doth foretell of 3 handsome children, that shall be born near the shore, which when they have attained a competent age, shall change the kingdom of that country, and suppress it. English. The blood of churchmen shall be spilt, as water in such abundance, and for a good while shall not be stayed, ruin and grievance shall be seen to the clerk. Not. This is easy to be understood, which foretelleth a very great persecution to the clergymen, viz. Papists, of which religion our author was, if this be not already past in the civil wars of France, that were made for religion, in the beginning of Reformation, where abundance of clergymen did perish on both sides. English. By the power of 3 temporal kings, the Holy See shall be put in another place, where the substance of the corporeal spirit shall be restored and admitted for a true seat. Not. This stanza is very remarkable, for the thing it foretelleth, viz. A translation of the See of Rome, that is, the popedom into another place by 3 temporal kings, and not only that, but it seemeth by the sense of the last 2 verses, that these will keep the ecclesiastical authority to themselves. English. Through the abundance of the army scattered, high and low, low and high, too great a belief a life lost in jesting, to die by thirst, through abundance of want. Not. The sense of this is, that by reason of a great army that shall be much scattered, and occupy a great deal of room, water will be so scarce, that some shall die for thirst. It is that he calleth here, to die by thirst, through abundance of want. Other stanzas heretofore printed, under the 8th century. English. Many shall be confounded in their expectation, the citizens shall not be forgiven, who thought to persevere in their resolution, but there shall not be given them a great leisure for it. Not. This is plain, and needeth no interpretation. English. Many shall come and shall talk of peace, between monarchs and lords very powerful, but it shall not be agreed to it so soon, if they do not shew themselves more obedient than others. Not. We are just now at the eve of this prophecy, when so many princes and potentates do bussy themselves about a mediation between the 2 crowns of France and Spain, and see English. Ha! What fury, alas what pity, there shall be betwixt many people, there was never seen such a friendship, as the wolf shall have in being diligent to run. Not. It is indeed a great fury and pity to see how wicked people, and chiefly usurers and false stealers, understood here by the name of wolves, are diligent in doing mischief, and to make good the old proverb, homo homini lupus, there being no other creature but the wolf that devours those of his own kind. English. Many folk shall come to speak, to great lords that shall make war against them, they shall not be admitted to a hearing, alas. If God doth not send peace upon earth. Not. This carrieth its sense with it, and is plain. English. Many helps shall come on all sides, of people far off, that would fain to resist, they shall be upon a sudden all very hasty, but for the present they shall not be able to assist. Not. This seemeth to point at this present conjuncture of affairs, where there is so many busying themselves about the relief of Flanders, of which I see no great likelihood. English. Ha! What pleasure take for reign princes? Take heed lest any should come into thy country, there should be terrible dangers, in several countries, and chiefly in Vienna. Not. There is 2 towns called Viennas, one is in Germany, in the province of Austria, and is the emperor's seat, the other in France, a matter of 20 miles beyond Lyon, the rest is easy. Century 9. English. In the house of the translator of Boer, the letter shall be found upon the table, blind of one eye, red, white, hoary, shall keep its course, which shall change at the coming of the new constable. Not. It is not easy to understand what he meaneth by the translator of Boer, unless it be some mean and pitiful fellow, that lived by translating things from one language into another, because the French used to call a man that is inconsiderable, un homme du boer, that is a man of flocks, and so much the more I am of this opinion, because of the scurvy epithets he attributeth to the same person, by which he might easily be known as blind of one eye, red, white, hoary, and see English. From the top of Mount Aventon, a voice was heard, get you gone on all sides, the collar shall be fed with the blood of the red ones, from Arimini and Prado, the Colonnas shall be driven away. Not. Mount Aventine is one of the 7 mountains of Rome, from the top of which our author saith that a voice was heard crying and repeating, get you gone, and the reason is, because choler and anger shall feed upon the blood of the cardinals, understood here by the name of red ones. Arimini and Prado are 2 cities in Italy. The Colonna is the chiefest and ancientest family of Rome. English. The Magna Vacua great trouble at Ravenna, conducted by 15, shut up at Fornace, at Rome shall be born 2 monsters with a double head, blood, fire, flood, the greater ones astonished. Not. This word of Magna Vacua is either falsely printed, or altogether barbarous and insignificant, and so is that of Fornace, which mocketh the 2 first verses incapable of translation, the other are easy. English. The year following being discovered by a flood, 2 chiefs elected, the first shall not hold, to fly from shade, to one shall be a refuge, that house shall be plundered, which shall maintain the first. Not. Our author meaneth, that the year after the former prophecy is come to pass, this shall also be fulfilled, whereby 2 chief commanders shall be chosen, the first of which shall not stand, but shall be compelled to run away, and to seek his security in the open fields, and that house that did uphold the first shall be plundered. English. The 3rd toe of the foot shall be like the first, to a new high monarch come from low estate, who being a tyrant shall cease upon Pise and Luica, to correct the faults of him that preceded him. Not. The meaning of this is, that some body pretending to mend the government of those 2 places that are in Italy, shall tyrannically make himself master of them. English. There shall be in Guyana an infinite number of English, who shall occupy it by the name of Angle-Aquitaine, of Languedoc, I by the land of Bordeaux, which afterwards they shall call Barboxitaine. Not. Here is foretold a famous invasion, that shall be made by the English upon that part of France called Guyenne, and in Latine Aquitania, of which Bordeaux is the chief city, insomuch, that the English afterwards shall call that country Angle-Aquitaine. English. He that shall open the sepulchre found, and shall not close it up again presently, evil will befall him, and he shall not be able to prove whether is best a Briton or Norman king. Not. The sense of this is perspicuous. English. A younger king causeth his father to be put to a dishonest death. After a battle, writing shall be found, that shall give suspicion and remorse, when a hunted wolf shall rest upon a truckle bed. Not. The words and sense are plain. English. When a lamp burning with unquenchable fire shall be found in the temple of the Vestals, a child shall be found, water running through a sieve, Nimes to perish by water, the market hall shall fall at Thaulis. Not. The ancient Vestals were a kind of religious virgins in the ancient Romans' time, who if they did forfeit their honor, were buried alive in a cave, with a little bread and water, and a lamp burning. Our author would have, that when a lamp shall be found lighted with an unquenchable fire, in that place where then their temple was, that then Nimes, which is a city of Languedoc, shall perish by water, and the market hall of Thaulis shall fall. Whether such a lamp may be contrived as to burn with an unquenchable fire, is too long and tedious a discourse to be disputed here. English. Monk and nun having exposed a dead child, to be killed by a she-bear, and snatched away by a glazier, the camp shall be set by Foy and Panniers, and against Thaulis, Carcass shall raise a harbinger. Not. Foy and Panniers are two towns in Languedoc, and so are Thaulis and Carcassonne, called here Carcass, for the abbreviation of the verse. The sense then of this prophecy is, that when the two first verses shall come to pass, that then an army shall lie about those towns, and Carcassonne shall be against Thalaus. English. The just shall be put to death wrongfully, publicly, and being taken out of the midst, so great a plague shall break into that place, that the judges shall be compelled to run away. Not. Many understand this of the late king and last plague. English. The so much silver of Diana and Mercury, the statue shall be found in the lake, the potter seeking for new clay, he and his shall be filled with gold. Not. This prophecy is concerning a potter, who seeking and digging for new clay, shall find in a drained lake the statues of Diana and Mercury all of silver, besides other great riches. Seeing this prophecy is not come to pass yet, that I know, it will not be amiss, for the divertisement of the reader, to relate here a notable and authentical history of a potter that hath much resemblance with this, and will be a convincing argument, that minds grow in the earth as turfs do, and as Virgil saith of the golden branch, uno avulso non deficit alter. It is written by Dr. de Roches, physician to the present Chancellor of France, who is upon the place, and an eyewitness of the circumstances of it, having also an interest in it, in the behalf of his father, who is overseer of the mines in that province. Therefore I shall relate it in his own words, as they are in his book of mineral waters. A notable history. In Provence near Thoulouse is a mountain called Carquarine, at the foot of which, and near the brim of the sea, there dwelled a potter with all his tools about him. It chanced that on a day as he went to fetch wood in that mountain, to bake his wares, he heard a voice of a little kid, which some shepherd had left behind them unawares, and was fallen in a little hole that answered to natural, great and deep caves. This man, seeing no shepherds about him, thought presently it was a strayed kid. Therefore he followed the cry with his ears so directly, that he came by the orifice of that hole, where he heard and saw the kid, which he resolved to carry away with his wood. Therefore he took the cords that were at his mule's saddle, and that he used to bind his load with, and with the help of them, and of some big pieces of wood he got down, where he did observe round about him many other caves, contiguous and separated from this, which his curiosity caused him to view, and found in the chief of these caves a great quantity of stones heaped upon one another, and of a substance and colour of brass, and among the rest there was one that came forth out of the rock, about the bigness, shape, and length of a man's arm. When it is stretched out, he did apparently judge that the weight and brittleness of that matter had caused those stones to fall down, and that the same that he saw come out of the rock in this manner was already loose and like to fall. This man, finding himself among such an abundance of rich lingots, which fortune did offer him, did not know the value of them, but did like the cock of Aesop, which left the precious pearl to take the corn of wheat. Thus this Jason took very little of this golden fleece, and only a small piece, which he broke from a bigger with one of his tools, and employed all his industry to carry away his kid, which at last with much ado he got out, and carried upon his mule, believing certainly that this provision would be more profitable to him and his family, than the yellow stone which he had in his pocket, weighing about 5 pounds, and which he intended to give to a tinker of Boulogne, his gossip and good friend, in hope that for the same he might be presented with a bottle of wine, to keep company to his kid. And accordingly the next morning by break of day he went to Boulogne and stayed in the shop of his friend, who did look with admiration upon so resplendent brass, a goldsmith who lodged over the way, and observed the splendor of that divine metal, drew near, and presently would have bargained for it, with a great deal of transportation and alteration. The potter asked him only 20 pence, which the goldsmith would have given him presently, but the tinker making sign to him to retract his words, he put his lingot in his pocket again, with protestation that he would not part with it, unless he had something that were worth the pains of going where he had it. In conclusion, after many contestations and disputes, the potter, who did suspect that it might be gold, would not sell nor deliver it under the sum of 30 crowns, which the gold smith paid him presently, and which he carried away with more joy than if he had been possessor of greater riches. The goldsmith on the other side, who thought that his profit would be above 100 pounds sterling, did refine the stone, that was about 5 pound weight, out of which he drew 4 pound weight, of very good and pure gold. The rest was a kind of dross, that made it thus brittle. One ought not to think that the mine is all of the same perfection, but it purifieth itself, according as nature thrusteth it out of the rock, as we see that rubies and emeralds are purer than the rock from whence they come. This goldsmith, having found such fortune, and being resolved to make the best use of it, went to the Lord Scaravac, then governor of the town, and imparted unto him this new discovery, that he might have his assistance and favor in it, and that under his power and authority he might follow and wait upon this precious business without being disturbed by any body, to which the governor did so much the easier consent, that this tradesman did oblige himself to give him the best part of the profit that should arise from thence, and that should exceed any travels into the Indies or Peru. In the meantime the potter was not asleep. The goldsmith's money had stirred his appetite, and the charm of this witchcraft that worketh generally upon all spirits did put him upon new hopes. He went into the mountain with his wife, and with the help of a rope ladder, which he had provided, and some iron tools, wherewith he had loaded his mule, he went down into the caves, and with much endeavor did at last break that piece that came out of the rock like a man's arm, because all the other that were tumbled upon the ground were so big and heavy that he could not remove them when he had broken it down, though it were about 62 pounds weight. Nevertheless, with the help of his wife and of his ropes and ladder he got out again, and stopped the hole with a large stone, and some earth, upon which he planted some small bushes so ingeniously, that this hole could never be found out again. The Lord Scaravac, who was most impatient to conquer like another Jason this golden fleece, and who was set on by the persuasions of the goldsmith, sent for the potter, under pretence to employ him in the making and furnishing of some tiles and other small commodities that depended on his art. The potter obeyed presently, drawn by the hopes to sell his wares well, and mistrusting nothing at all what they would ask him. As soon as he came, the governor asked him and persuaded him with the best and most flattering words he could, to tell where he had the yellow stone that he sold to the goldsmith. The potter, who more and more began to know the value of this rare treasure, invented presently a lie, to free himself of the importunity of them that would have deceived him. Therefore, with an ingenuity as simple as artificial, he answered, he had found it upon the brim of the sea, where maybe some ship had been cast away, or the waves had cast it upon the shore. The governor answered that this could not be, and therefore threatened him of violence, and to send for all that he had in his house, which put the fellow into a great perplexity, because of the other stone that should be found there. Therefore he chose rather to give it them out of his good will, than to put himself in danger of losing all, and perchance of being abused to boot. Without any more ado, he ingenuously confessed he had another piece of the same stuff as the former in his house, which he had likewise found in the same place, which he was ready to put into their hands, provided he might have his share of it, and be suffered to get his livelihood peaceably. The Lord Scaravac did promise him all what he desired, and gave him some men to keep him company, with command to bring him back again, and to take special care he should not make an escape. At last this poor man came back again with that piece, which did more inflame the passion that the governor had to know the place whence came that rich treasure, but neither for prayers, promises, or threats he would never reveal it, which did oblige the governor to shut him up close in a chamber, where nevertheless they gave him victuals and made ready a bed, but he refused both, and by an extraordinary sadness, gave shew that some notorious mischance was waiting on him, which proved true. For he was found dead in the morning, which did put the Lord Scaravac in a grief unexpressible, to see himself deprived by this accident of the fruit that his hopes had made him conceive. He had recourse to the potter's wife for this discovery, but she could never attain to it, whatsoever exact searches she could make, and after she was married again with a young man, who had spent in that search most of his time. The Lord Scaravac and other persons of quality have employed all their skills and endeavours, but all their industry and charges have been without effect, as well as of many others, who attempted the same. About that time my father, who is overseer of the mines in Provence, having received the news of a business of such consequence, that did concern his place, went presently unto that mountain, to see if he could discover those wonders. I was then in his company, as also that woman, viz. the potter's wife, who carried us in several places for many days, without any success at all, although she gave notice that she could hear the waves of the sea, when she was in the cave with her first husband, so that all our endeavors proved fruitless and unprofitable, because my father fell sick, which made us forsake our quest, which is of such a consequence as not to be neglected. During the time of our painful visiting that mountain, I did consider the particularities of that rich mountain, and observed that the top of it was almost all azza, which tokens are the beams of that golden sun, and are the hairs of that fair goodness, under whose feet all things submit, in a word, are the true and infallible signs that underneath are mines of gold and silver. And as I have directed all my thoughts many times to find out the means to compass so excellent a work, whose profit would surpass all what the Indies furnish unto strangers, and that with so much less charges and danger, that there is no heat of ships or fleet to cross over the sea, from one pole to the other, nor fight against any enemies, at last I have attained to a certain knowledge, which putteth me in hope, and makes me promise and engage my word, that at least I shall find a thread of that golden mine, which may chance to lead us to the center of all these treasures, but the royal authority being necessary to prop up this design, it belongeth to his majesty to take what course he thinketh best for this, and to me to obey, execute his will. This digression, which is an assured experiment, that is a certain truth, is not come into this discourse, but only to prove that minds grow by augmentation, in converting into their own nature the more subtle parts of the neighboring earth. Thus far Dr. de Roches. English. The banished about Salogny, being conducted by night to go into Auxois, two of Medina, the cruel of Bologna, shall be discovered by the fire of Baroncois. Anat. Salogny is a province in France, between the Perche and the Maine. Auxois is a country in the south of France, so called of its chief town called Auch, the seat of an archbishop. Medina is a town in Italy, and Bologna another not far from it. Baroncois is a part of the province of Dauphine. The meaning then of this prophecy is, this being known, the reader may easily find out the rest of the sense. English. A dyer's kettle being put in a plen, with wine, honey and oil, and built upon furnace, shall be dipped, without evil, called malefactors. 7. Femme. Put out at the cannon of Bornos. Anat. This hath a relation to the punishment, which in some parts of France and Flanders is inflicted upon false coiners, which are commonly boiled in oil, in a great kettle, such as our author here saith belong to dyers. The author then will have that the time shall come, when 7 of that gang shall be so punished together in a plain, where a great kettle shall be set for that purpose upon a furnace. English. Near unto Parpin the red ones detained, those of the middle sunk and carried far off, 3 cut in pieces, and 5 ill-backed, for the lord and prelate of Burgoyne. Anat. Parpin is either a barbarous or feigned name, by the red ones, he hath hitherto understood some cardinals, the reader may expound the rest according to his fancy. English. Out of Castelfranco shall come the assembly, the ambassador not pleased, shall make a schism, those of Riviere shall be in the medley, and shall deny the entry of the great gulf. Anat. Castelfranco is a town in Piedmont, Riviere is a strong castle in Burgundy, but what he meaneth by the great gulf, is more than I can tell. English. The third first, worse than ever did Nero, go out valiant, he shall spill much humane blood, he shall cause the Fornerin to be builded again, golden age dead, new king great troubles. Anat. This prophecy pointeth directly at our author's master Charles IX. King of France, whom he calleth he the third first, because he was the third son to Henry the second. And came to be king, using more cruelties than ever Nero did, for he was the cause of the massacre of the Protestants in France in the year 1572, where above 100,000 people were murdered. Fornerin is a barbarous word, put here to make a verse, and to rhyme with Nerin. At that time he saith the golden age was dead, and upon the coming of a new king, who is Henry the third, great tumults did happen, and great wars, as is to be seen in the French history. English. Dauphin shall carry the lily into Nancy, as far as Flanders the elector of the empire, new hindrance to great Montmorency, out of proved places, delivered to a clear pain. Not. Although the words and sense of this prophecy be most obscure, nevertheless we shall endeavor as much as we can to render them something intelligible to the reader. By the first verse is to be understood that Dauphin, or rather Dauphinois, which is the title of the kings of France' eldest son, shall carry the lily, which is the arms of France, into Nancy, the chief town in Lorraine, which came to pass in the time of the last King Louis XIII. By the second verse is understood the Elector of Triers, who was taken by the Spaniards in his own town, and carried prisoner to Bruxelles. By the third and fourth is expressed the ill luck of the Duke of Montmorency, who having taken part with the Duke of Lorraine, and the Duke of Orleans the king's brother, was routed in a battle, taken prisoner, and afterwards beheaded at Thoulouse. English. In the middle of the forest of Mayenne, Sol being in Leo the lightning shall fall, the great bastard begot by the great Dumaine, that day Fougers shall enter its point into blood. Not. Fougers is either the name of a town in Little Brittany, or that of a noble house. The words are very plain, therefore I leave the sense to everyone's capacity. English. By night shall come through the forest of Rennes, two parts fall toward Herne, the white stone, the black monk in grey within Varennes, elected cap causeth tempest, fire, blood cutteth. Not. Rennes is the chief town of Little Brittany. The second verse, being made of barbarous words, is impossible to be understood. The third and fourth verse signifieth, that when a black monk in that town of Varennes shall put on a grey soot, he shall be elected captain, and cause a great tempest or broils by fire and blood. English. At the high temple of Blois sacred salon, in the night the bridge of Loire, Prelat, King Mischievous, a smarting victory in the marsh of Laon, whence prelature of white ones shall be abortive. Not. There is a mistake in the first verse, for instead of salon, it must be written salaire, which is a priory and church at the top of Blois. All the rest signifieth that in one night these shall happen, viz. that the bridge, the prelat, and a pernicious king with a smart victory shall perish, whence the prelature, that is the place of command upon the white ones, viz. Canons and prebends in their surplices, shall be void and empty. English. King and his court in the place of Long Halby, within the church over against the Palais, in the garden Duke of Montier and Alba, Alba and Mantor, dagger, tongue and palate. Not. This stanza is very obscure, for, first nobody can tell what he meaneth by Long Halby, which is the foundation of all the rest of the sense, secondly, what this Duke of Montier and Mantor should be, which has been unknown in the histories hitherto, and thirdly, what construction and sense can be made of these disjunctives, Alba, Mantor, dagger, tongue, palate. Therefore I'll leave it free to everybody's opinion to make his construction. English. The youngest son playing under the tun, the top of the house shall fall upon his head, the king his father in the temple of Saint Solane, sacrificing shall make festival smoke. Not. By this is meant, that the youngest son of a king shall be knocked in the head, while he is a-playing under a tun, his father being at the same time in the temple of Saint Solane at Massachusetts, English. Upon the Palais at the Rock of the Windows, shall be carried the two little royal ones, to pass Oriel, Lutis, Dennis Cloisters, non-name, Mullets to swallow green stones of fruit. Not. These 2 or 3 last stanzas have been concerning the city of Blois, to which it seemeth that this hath also relation, for he saith that 2 little royal children shall be carried at the top of the castle, and shall be conveyed beyond Orel, which is Orleans in Latine Aurelianum, Lutis, which is Paris, Dennis Cloisters, which is beyond Paris, and a nunnery besides, Where it is like they shall be left to eat green stones of fruit, which is not easy to be understood, no more than the word molids. English. Going over the bridge to come near the rose trees, come late, and sooner than he thought, the new Spaniards shall come to Béziers, who shall cashier this new undertaken hunting. Not. Béziers is a city in Languedoc, the rest may be construed by the meanest capacity. English. A silly going out, caused by sharp letters. The great cap shall give what is not his, near Voltry by the walls of green capers, about Piombino the wind shall be in good earnest. Not. This signifieth that there shall be a silly surrendering of a town, caused by sharp and threatening letters that shall be sent into it. By the great cap he useth to understand the Pope, who he saith shall give what is not it, as he hath done many times. Voltry, in Latine Velitrum, and Piombino are two cities in Italy, which are threatened here with mighty winds. English. The fence being of wood, close wind, bridge shall be broken, he that's received high, shall strike at the dolphin, the old Tekken shall pass over smooth wood, going over the right confines of the Duke. Not. The first verse signifieth that a wooden bridge shall be broken by a close wind, as did happen to the Miller's Bridge, and the Bird's Bridge in Paris. The second verse seemeth to foretell the conspiracy of the Mareschal of Biron against Henry IV, his dolphin and estate. The third and fourth, the wars and conquest which the said king, whom he called Old Tekken, made upon the Duke of Savoy, who had corrupted the said Marshal of Biron. English. Samaclian sail, Massilian port, in Venice to march towards the Hungarians, to go away from the Gulf and Illyric Sea, towards Sicily, the Genoese with cannon shots. Not. What he meaneth by Samaclian sail, is not easy to determine. Massilian port is that of Marseilles in France, called in Latine Massilia. The sense of this prophecy then, if any be, is, that a great fleet shall go from thence to Venice, to carry succours to the Hungarians, who it seemeth shall be much distressed at that time by the Turks, and that Sicily and Genoa shall add to this fleet a considerable succour of men, and warlike munition. English. When he that giveth place to no body, shall forsake the place taken, and not taken, fire, ship, by bleeding bituminous at Charlou, then Quinton and Bales shall be taken again. Not. He that giveth place to no body is the Pope. As for the last verse, I had rather read Street Quinton and Gales, which are two considerable towns in France, than otherwise. That place taken, not taken, was the city of Noyon in Picardy, which was taken by the Spanish cavalry, clothed after the French mode, which stratagem deceived the citizens and soldiers that defended it, so he saith taken, because it fell into the hands of the Spaniards, and not taken, because it was by a stratagem or deceit. English. At the harbour of Pola and of St. Nicholas, a Norman ship shall perish in the Fanatic Gulf, at the Cape of Byzantium the streets shall cry alas. Succours from Cadiz and from the great Philippe. Not. Pola is for Paolo here, and by it is understood the port of Malta, which being besieged by the Turks, Philip II, King of Spain, sent an army to relieve it, which made those of Byzantium, which is Constantinople, cry alas, and see. English. There shall be an earthquake at Mortera, Cassock, St. George shall be half swallowed up, the war shall awake the sleeping pace, upon Easter day shall be a great hole sunk in the church. Not. Mortera is a town in Italy, by Cassock and St. George he meaneth two other places. English. A deep column of fine porphyry shall be found, under whose basis shall be Roman writings, bones, hairs twisted, Roman force tried, a fleet a gathering about the port of Methelin. Not. Porphyry is a kind of hard red marble speckled with white spots, which is very scarce, and chiefly in great pieces. Our author then saith that a great column of that stuff shall be found, and about the basis of it some words in Roman characters, and that about that time a great fleet shall be a gathering at the port of Methelin, which is an island in the archipelago, belonging now to the Turks. As for the third verse, I cannot tell what to make of it. English. Hercules king of Rome, and Denmark, of France 3 Gaian surnamed, shall cause Italy to quake, and one of St. Mark, he shall be above all a famous monarch. Not. All these intricate words and sense foretell that, when a king of Denmark named Hercules shall be made king of the Romans, that then Italy and Venice itself shall stand in great fear of him, and that he shall be as great a prince or monarch as ever was in Europe, and that very likely, for by his dignity of king of the Romans he consequently shall attain to the empire. English. The separated husband shall wear a mitre, returning battle he shall go over the tile, by 501 dignified shall be betrayed, Narbonne and Celsus shall have oil by the quintal. Anat. The first verse signifieth, that some certain man who is married, shall be parted from his wife, and shall attain to some great ecclesiastical dignity. The second verse is, that in coming back from some place or enterprise, he shall be met and fought with, and compelled to escape over the tiles of a house. The third verse is, that a man of great account shall be betrayed by 500 of his men. And the last, that when these things shall come to pass, Narbonne and Celsus, which are two cities of Languedoc, shall reap and make a great deal of oil. English. And Ferdinand, having a troop of fair men, shall leave the flower to follow the Macedonian, at his great need his way shall fail him, and he shall go against the Myrmidon. Anat. This prophecy ought to be understood of an emperor of Germany, whose name shall be Ferdinand, who being accompanied with many Germans, that for the most part are fair-haired people shall come in war against Graecia, which is expressed here by the names of Macedon and Myrmidon, the first of which is a country, and the last a nation, both in Graecia. English. A great king taken in the hands of a young one, not far from Easter, confusion, stroke of a knife, shall commit, pitiful time, the fire at the top of the mast, 3 brothers then shall wound one another, and murder done. Anat. This prophecy was fulfilled in the year 1560. When Antony of Bourbon king of Navarre, and his brother Louis of Bourbon prince of Condé, coming to King Francis II. At Orleans, upon the 29th of October, the Prince of Condé was put in prison, and the King of Navarre arrested. The Lord Andrew Fawn, in his History of Navarre, saith, that the opinion of the council was, that the Prince of Condé should be beheaded, for having been the chief of the conspiracy at Amboise, and the King of Navarre should be stabbed in the king's chamber by the king himself, assisted by others for that purpose. The Lady of Montpensier gave notice of it to the King of Navarre, who being sent for by the king, charged expressly Cat and his waiting man and an old servant of his father to take a care and preserve his bloody shirt after his death, till his son came to age, to revenge it upon the murderers. God be thanked this came not to pass, for the king having called him, and going about to provoke him with foul words, he answered so meekly and humbly, that the king's anger was appeased, whereupon the Duke of Guise going out of the room said, "Oh, what a cowardly prince is this!" These things are expressed in the first and second verse, when he saith that a great king should be put in prison by a young one, because Antony of Bourbon, though he was not a great king in lands, yet he was a great one in courage and prudence. And it was not far from Easter, sith it was but 5 months before, viz. From the beginning of November to the 6th of April 1591, which was Easter Day, the author putteth in this circumstance, because the next Easter after, the King of Navarre was made General of France under the Queen Regent. He addeth the blow of a knife, as we have shewed, he also saith a lasting bad time, which proved very true, moreover, he saith, what lightning in the hunt or topmast, because King Francis died presently after. In the 4th verse he saith, that 3 brothers shall be hurt and killed. Those 3 brothers were Antony of Bourbon king of Navarre, killed at the siege at Rouen, the Cardinal of Bourbon, and Louis of Bourbon prince of Condé, killed at the battle of Jarnac. English. Bridges and mills in December overturned, in so high a place the Garonne shall come, walls, building, thou lose overturned, so that none shall know its place, so much matrone. Anat. Here is foretold a prodigious inundation of the river Garonne, in the month of December, by which the walls, building, and the city of Thoulouse is threatened to be overturned. The last word of all is barbarous, and added to make up the rhyme. English. The coming in at Blaye by Rochelle, and the English, shall go beyond the Great Emathian, not far from Agen shall expect the French, help from Narbonne deceived by entertainment. Anat. For the better understanding of this, the hard words must first be made plain. Blaye is a city upon the river Garonne, and the port town to Bordeaux. Rochelle is a city upon the same coast. Agen is a city in Gascony not far from Bordeaux, and Narbonne is a city in Languedoc, by the Mediterranean Sea. Emathion was formerly the country of Macedonia, wherein Julius Caesar and c. Pompeius fought their last battle in the Pharsalian fields, and therefore saith the Latine poet Lucanus, Bella per Emathios plusquam Civilia campos. These things being considered, the sense is, that there shall be an invasion made by the English, to whom those of Rochelle shall join, upon the town of Blaye, which shall proceed as far as Agen, and that thereabout will be a bloody encounter between the English and French, beyond that which was fought in the Emathian fields, and that the succours that should come from Narbonne to the French, shall be deluded and hindered by the speech and discourse of some English. In Arbacella, the Zema and Crevari, being conducted by night to take Savona, the quick Gascon, Gyri and the Chari, behind old walls and new Palais to grapple. Anat. Arbacella is a town situated by the seaside above Savona, going towards Genoa. The Zema and Crevari are in the inland country, and a little further remote from the sea than Arbacella. The quick Gascon was Blasius of Montluc, one of the valiantest men of his time, who came from a single soldier to be Marshal of France. Gyri and La Chari were two of his companions. This stanza doth prophetically foretell two things. One is, the design that the Marshal of Brissac, then governor of Piedmont, had upon Savona; the other, the taking of Pienca by Blasius of Montluc. As to the first, the Lord of Villers writeth in his memorials, that the Lord Damse sent advice to the king, that the taking of Savona was more probable than any other design, which signifieth that the Marshal of Brissac had of a long time eyed that town, and therefore he sent by night some troops into those three little towns, to see if they could surprise Savona, but the design did not succeed. The histories only mention that the Marshal of Brissac went from court in the year 1557. with a design to take Savona, but this stanza speaketh of the same design 1556. At the same time in the year 1556, the 29 of June, Blasius of Montluc, as he relateth in his commentaries, did surprise the town and fort of Piance, called in Latine Corsinianum. He had with him the Captain La Chari, the Captain Bartholomew of Pizarro, and the son of Captain Luzon. At first the French were beaten back, but the valiant Montluc did encourage them again by his example, going the first in, and saying only, "Follow your captain." Which having said, he thrust himself under the gate, where 3 or 4 men might stand sheltered by the planks of the fort, and having his sword in the left hand, and his dagger in the right, he began to break and cut the brick and made a hole, which opening by degrees, he thrust his arm through, and pulled the gap so strongly, that he caused all the wall to fall down upon himself, without being hurt by it. This is the meaning of the author in the 4th verse, when he saith, "The quick Gascon was behind the wall." In prosecution of this, the Switzers did beat down the rest of the wall, and all came into the town crying, "France, France." Montluc ran presently to the fort, and with the help of his men took it. That is the meaning of the author, when he saith, "Old and new Palais to grapple." The old Palais was adjoining to the market-place of the town, in which the French were prisoners with the Captain Gorges, to the number of 50 or 60 tied 2 and 2, and so kept by 20 soldiers, whom they did kill as we have said. The new Palais was the fort. The author used that ancient word graper, which in the Provençal language signifieth, to pull down with one's hands, and in the contrary sense, to shut and plaister so well something, that there will be a necessity of the help of the hands to open what was shut up. English. Near Quintin in the forest Bourleys, in the abbey the Flemings shall be slashed, the 2 younger sons half astonished with blows, the followers oppressed, and the guards all cut in pieces. Anat. This is a peculiar accident that happened before the taking of the town of St. Quintin by the Spaniard in the year 1557. And fell out thus. News being come to the King of France, that the powerful army of the Spaniard was gone to besiege Street Quintin, he made all imaginable diligence to succor it. The Spaniards, to hinder the relief, had seized upon an ancient abbey of the Vermandois, which is in the next forest, that was anciently called the Forest Bourleys, and is at present called the Forest of the Abbey Vermandois, called in Latine Augusta Veromandurum, builded by an ancient Hungarian captain called Vermandig. In process of time it was all ruinated, and only one abbey left, wherein was the episcopal see, which afterwards was transferred into the city of Noyon. After the ruin of this town, that of St. Quintin next to it became the chief city of Vermandois. It was named Street Quintin, because the Emperor Diocletian having sent Street Quintin a Roman senator to be governor of it, he did convert the inhabitants to the Christian faith, and after he himself did suffer their martyrdom. In that abbey a great many Flemings had entrenched themselves, but the French going to relieve the town, did force their trenches and fortifications, and in the heat of the fight the two younger sons of the captain being armed cap a pee, though they were not killed, yet were astonished with blows they did receive upon their heads, their followers and guards being all cut in pieces.